Welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. In this webinar, we will revisit our Global Security Balance Sheet 2025 to understand how last year's conflict dynamics help explain today's global security landscape in 2026. Using a structured, data-driven approach, we will explore key patterns, areas of escalation, and what they reveal for political risk analysis today. To dive right in, I would like to hand over to Dr. Nicolas Schwank, our Chief Data Scientist for Political Risk. Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Jessica, thank you very much. A warm welcome also from my side to today's webinar. Our title is Looking Back to Look Ahead. And the central question we want to explore today is, can the analysis of global conflict dynamics in 2025 help us understand today's conflict landscapes? Because the current situation is clearly concerning for many companies, but also for society at large. It raises serious questions. Many organizations are asking themselves, was this situation foreseeable? This is why the question of early warning and early detection of geopolitical risk is becoming increasingly important. If we look at the current situation, based on our data analysis, the picture is quite alarming. We are seeing around 50 ongoing wars and warlike conflicts worldwide, including conflicts where nuclear powers are directly involved. These developments are already having a massive impact on energy prices, on supply chains, and on the global economy as a whole. And beyond the conflicts currently in the spotlight, there are others with significant global risk potential, such as the tensions between China and Taiwan. So this is where we stand today. But none of this developed overnight. If we take a step back and look at 2025, we can already see the patterns that shape today's situation. And these patterns can be summarized in three key dynamics. First, the growing instability. Second, the persistence of existing areas of conflict. And thirdly, silent escalations in the shadow of major conflicts. But before we dive into this, where does this data come from? The MBI-CONIAS dataset was developed starting in 1988 to improve the understanding of conflict dynamics and to enhance early warning systems. It systematically tracks violent and non-violent political conflicts in time series since 1945. The dataset is based on observable actions, events, and statements used to assess conflict dynamics. It covers more than 3,700 subnational units and includes over 2,500 ongoing and historical conflicts. All data is based exclusively on publicly available sources. To make these patterns more tangible, let's move from the conceptual level to the data itself. What you see here is a dashboard developed by one of our partners, but based entirely on our MBI-CONIAS conflict data. It maps global conflict dynamics across the past 5 quarters. We are currently looking at December 2025, so the latest snapshot before the current escalations unfolded. And based on this view, I'd like to walk you through the first of the 3 patterns we identified: instability. Instability does not mean that the conflicts are constantly escalating. It means that they are changing. We see it in shifting intensities, new dynamics, and developments often below the threshold of war. And this is what matters. Instability shows us where risks are emerging before they turn into open escalation, and where even small shifts can have significant consequences for the international system. Let us now take a look to the United States of America as one of the contributors for more instability and rising instability in the world of conflicts in 2025 and 2026. If we switch to December 2024, was the last month before the inauguration of President Trump. We can have a look, an overview on our data and see that the United States are quite stable. There is no real political violence observable. Of course, there are tensions within the country, but also with other countries. But we see that in total, the country was affected by 69 ongoing political conflicts. Now let us switch to the end of the year, to December 2025, 1 year with President Trump. And we see an incredible increase of ongoing political conflicts. And our analysis shows that almost all of the new conflicts are international. And compared to our data sets, this is really highly unusual. In 2025, the US became significantly more active internationally, increasingly accepting confrontation and in doing so contributing to a destabilization of the international system. And therefore, it's absolutely necessary for good analysis to know what are the 102 conflicts about and who is also affected by these conflicts, who are the conflict partners, so to say, and also which economy and which trade relation could be affected by these ongoing conflicts. And therefore, it is really important to get a deeper insight. What are the 102 conflicts about? And here you see one of the really big advantages of the MBA CONIUS dataset and also of this application. By clicking on this button, you get an PDF report, which helps you easily to inform your colleagues and the desire of your company of the current situation of the country. In this example, it's the United States. You get an overview of the number of ongoing conflicts, the affected regions of the country, but also a detailed list of the ongoing conflicts. And you get not only the name of the conflict, you get an information if it's an inner or interstate conflict, the intensity, and also a small description that you know what is the conflict about. And by the way, you see here is the conflict USA-Cuba. It might be good to have this conflict back in mind for the near future. But let us now come to a second example for growing instability in 2025, the country Iran. The key question here is, was the escalation of February 2026 or March 2026 foreseeable? And if we have now a look at the end of quarter 2025, so December 25, you see in Iran some regions affected by violence. But if we have a closer look on it, we see that almost all of these ongoing conflicts are interstate. But the point is to have a broader look and to see also more in the past. And if you click on the June 2025, you see a different situation. And this is a real turning point for the explanation of the situation in Iran. The attacks by Iran and the United States marked a real shift from indirect confrontation to open interstate violence. These conflicts, these steps, these events fundamentally changed the dynamics, moving this conflict from a non-violent crisis toward a limited war. At the same time, these conflicts lowered the escalation barriers and increased systematic pressure on the country. Importantly, these events also revealed that Iran might be weaker than previously assumed, and that the intervention of the United States and Israel did not achieve its intended political outcomes in June 2012. These are strong reasons why this conflict remained on the watch list, and why, at the latest with the deployment of US aircraft carriers in January and February, all escalation scenarios had to be considered. A second key aspect of our analysis is the persistence of violent conflict structures. These are conflicts that do not escalate significantly, but also do not disappear. And these conflicts often affect entire regions or countries. In other words, they were present in 2025 and are highly likely to persist. This kind of permanent violence represents a significant and ongoing source of uncertainty in many countries of the world. One good example for this persistence of violence is Colombia. Colombia is one of the largest economies in Latin America, with a growing urban middle class in a relatively diversified economy. It also offers other advantages: its proximity to the United States. It has access to 2 different oceans, and its participation in multiple free trade agreements. However, a major downside remains. There are a lot of long-standing violent conflicts, especially in the north of the country. And these conflicts continue to shape the stability and the safety within the country. These conflicts do not necessarily escalate, but they remain a structural factor that affects stability and long-term planning. A second helpful report is the risk assessment report based on subnational units. In this example for Colombia, Antioquia. Similarly to the country report, you see the highest intensity of all conflict in this month. You get an overview how many conflicts take place directly within this region. This means they are conducted with violent measures in these regions in this month. And also a really important key indicator is how much of the last 12 months was this region affected with political violence. And you see here it's a 12 out of 12. So Antioquia was the whole last year affected by political violence. The highest intensity was measured was here the 4.5. That means something between limited war and war. Besides this, we calculate for each subnational unit forecast trend. This is based on the values which we collect for the last years, and it's calculated trend which we use as a kind of forecast. This region, as you can see, is affected by totally 9 different political conflicts. Some of them are violent. You get an overview of which they are, and you get also in views that these conflicts might be different in their structure, in the events that they are creating. We have here a very old conflict, for example, the ELN conflict. Now the ELN is much smaller since they used to be in the 1970s, 1980s. But we have also conflict like the organized crime. And organized crime is something which have a totally different structure than, for example, the ELN conflict. So this is an absolutely helpful tool which supports your working as an analyst. A second example for persistence of political violence in the world is Myanmar. Myanmar is maybe known by the civil war some years ago, but almost not available in the current news and newspapers. But Myanmar is one of the most highly violent countries in the world so far. So Myanmar is one of the few countries in the world which is almost totally affected by high violent conflicts, by limited war or war. One really big problem of the country is currently is that the number of ongoing conflicts with violence is quite high. So this is a symptom of a very weak state and a very weak government, and also a weak army of the country. So what you can observe currently, but also in the last years, that there's a growing number of refugees which try to cross the border to the neighboring countries. And in some cases, they transport, so to say, also their conflicts within their new countries and within the neighboring countries. So Myanmar gets more and more a really risk factor for the whole region. Having this data in mind, we expect that also in 2026 and in 2027 at latest, the country will remain on a high level of political violence, maybe also for the next years. And let us now come to the third pattern we observed, that is the silent escalation. After instability and persistence continuity, this is about developments that happen below the radar. They don't show up as immediate escalation, but through gradual change in increasing pressure. And this is exactly why they matter, because they show us where future risks are emerging before they come visible. One good example for this are the growing number of geostrategic conflicts in the Pacific region. These conflicts remain in most cases non-violent and therefore receive only due attention in official newspapers. These conflicts show increasing competition over influence, infrastructure, and military access. And in that sense, they reflect a growing expectation that a conflict between China and Taiwan is becoming more likely. Let's take a second example for countries with silent escalations, Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a key player in global supply chains. Especially, it is well known as of the largest exporter of garments after China. For many companies, stable domestic conditions are essential. However, in 2025, we observed significant dynamics within domestic political conflicts. 2025 was marked by protests, political violence, and targeted killings of political figures. The former political party was banned, but it continues to mobilize through social media and mass support. The situation remains tense, especially after the elections in early 26. So what these examples show is one thing. To really understand conflict, we need to observe it over time, because it's only across longer periods that these patterns become visible. If we now step back and look at the full year across all 4 quarters, we can see how these patterns develop over time. So it's not a static picture, it is a process. And only by looking at the full period do these underlying dynamics become visible. So let me close by coming back to our initial question. Could we have foreseen today's escalation? My answer: not as a specific event, but as a development, very much so. What we see is a system in motion, characterized by instability. At the same time, many conflicts persist over long periods, creating structural and lasting risk. And some of the most important developments happen quietly, through gradual escalation, often outside the spotlights.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for these valuable insights. With that, we will conclude today's webinar. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. We hope you found the session insightful. The presentation slides and the recording of the webinar will be shared with you in a follow-up email shortly. Thank you very much and have a nice rest of your day. Bye.